It was a cold, crisp night in the small town of Oak Ridge, Texas. The moon was nearly full, casting its eerie glow over the long stretches of open highway that ran through the town. The wind whispered through the fields of tall grass, and the sounds of the night seemed more amplified than usual. There was an unsettling quiet that surrounded the area, a strange stillness that made even the most experienced travelers uneasy. Jack Collins, a seasoned truck driver, had driven this highway countless times. His life revolved around hauling goods across Texas through the sprawling plains and endless miles of desolate roads. But tonight felt different. Jack's rig rumbled along the highway, headlights cutting through the darkness. The road stretched out in front of him, as lonely and endless as it always was. His truck's tires hummed rhythmically as he settled into his seat, hands gripping the steering wheel firmly. The sound of his engine was the only thing that filled the silence, the only thing keeping him from the growing unease he felt. It was around midnight when the first sign appeared. Jack noticed the headlights flickering erratically. He thought it was just a glitch in the system, but the strange malfunction persisted. The dashboard lights blinked in a manner that made him uncomfortable. "Damn truck," he muttered under his breath as he fiddled with the controls, trying to get everything back to normal. But just as quickly as the flickering started, a low static sound filled the cabin. He instinctively reached for the radio dial, thinking it might be the cause of the noise. As his fingers brushed the knob, a voice suddenly came through the speakers. Low, sorrowful, and unmistakably female. Jack froze. The voice wasn't coming from the radio. It was like someone was speaking directly into his ears. No, please don't leave me, ma'am." The voice whimpered. It sounded like crying, followed by muffled sobs. Jack's breath caught in his throat as he turned off the radio, trying to dismiss the chill creeping down his spine. But the crying didn't stop. It only grew louder. His heart began to race. "It's just the radio," he whispered to himself, trying to calm his nerves. Nothing to be afraid of. He gripped the wheel tightly, trying to focus on the road ahead. The static and cries continued to echo in his mind, drowning out his thoughts. Sweat started to bead on his forehead, and he instinctively glanced at his rearview mirror. There was nothing behind him, only darkness stretching into infinity. And then he saw her. Out of the corner of his eye, Jack noticed a figure standing at the edge of the road. His heart skipped a beat. In the dim glow of his headlights, a woman in a red dress appeared, standing motionless on the side of the highway. She seemed to be waiting for something, or someone. Jack's first instinct was to keep driving. It wasn't unusual for travelers to hitchhike in remote areas, but something about this woman was different. The way she stood there, her face hidden in the shadows, was unnerving. He could feel the hairs on the back of his neck standing up. But before he could drive past, something in his chest urged him to stop. He wasn't sure why, but he found himself pulling the truck to the side of the road. The woman didn't move, but as the truck came to a halt, Jack's nerves flared up again. The quiet of the night became suffocating, and the only sound was the soft hum of the engine. "Can I help you?" Jack called out, trying to keep his voice steady, though a tremor ran through him. There was no response. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, slowly, the woman turned her head, her face still hidden beneath the long strands of dark hair. She took a single step toward him, moving with a strange grace. Jack's breath caught in his throat. Her eyes were glowing a deep, unnatural red, faint at first but growing brighter as she came closer. Without a word, she silently climbed into the truck's passenger seat, her presence heavy, almost suffocating. Jack swallowed hard, his palms beginning to sweat as he adjusted the rearview mirror. The woman's gaze was fixed ahead, her face still obscured by the shadow of her hair. "Where are you headed?" Jack asked, trying to make conversation to calm his racing heart. No answer. Jack shifted uneasily in his seat. The air in the truck grew cold, an icy chill creeping into his bones. It wasn't just the temperature. It was something else, something he couldn't explain. He wanted to say something, to break the silence, but he couldn't bring himself to do it. The road stretched on endlessly, the headlights illuminating the dark highway ahead. Jack tried to focus on the road, but the woman's presence next to him made it nearly impossible. His mind raced, questioning what had driven him to stop in the first place. He could feel her cold stare even without looking at her. Suddenly, a strange noise broke the silence. The faint sound of footsteps dragging across the floor. Jack's heart skipped a beat, and he glanced nervously toward the passenger seat. The woman's head was now turned toward him, her eyes glowing with a fiery intensity. Her face, what Jack could see of it, was distorted. Her skin was pale, and her features twisted into a grotesque grin. Her long neck extended unnaturally, and Jack could see dark streaks of blood around her mouth, dripping from her lips. Before Jack could react, the truck swerved violently, almost sending him off the road. The brakes were useless. The truck was accelerating on its own, as though someone or something was pushing it forward. Jack slammed his foot down on the brake pedal, but the truck kept speeding up, faster and faster. The woman laughed, a horrible echoing sound that seemed to shake the very air around them. Jack's pulse raced as he tried to control the wheel, but it was no use. The truck veered off the road and crashed into a tree. Everything went black. When Jack regained consciousness, he was in a hospital bed. His body ached, his head pounding with each breath. The bright lights above him flickered as he tried to sit up, his mind still foggy. Panic gripped him as he searched the room. He was alone. A nurse entered the room, looking at him with a mixture of sympathy and confusion. "You're awake. You've been out for a while," she said softly. "What happened?" Jack asked, his voice hoarse. Where is she?" The nurse looked puzzled. "Whoa! The woman in the red dress," Jack stammered, his eyes wide with fear. "She was with me. The nurse interrupted him gently. "You were alone, sir. The police confirmed it. No one else was in the truck." Jack shook his head, disbelief washing over him. "That's impossible," he whispered, his mind reeling. "She was there, she was with me," but the nurse just gave him a sympathetic smile. "You've been through a traumatic experience, Mr. Collins. It's common for people to experience things after an accident. You're lucky to be alive." But Jack wasn't so sure. He knew what he had seen. The memory of the woman's terrifying face, her bloodshot eyes, and the horrible laughter still haunted him. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. Days passed, but Jack's life was no longer the same. The images of the woman in the red dress tormented him day and night. He couldn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, her distorted face appeared in his dreams. The voice, the crying, was all he could hear. Determined to find the truth, Jack sought out a paranormal investigator named Mark Hayes. Mark was known throughout the region for his expertise in dealing with the supernatural. He had heard rumors of strange occurrences on the highway, stories that matched Jack's experience all too closely. When Mark met with Jack, he listened attentively to his story. After a long pause, Mark spoke. "It sounds like you encountered the spirit of Emily Davenport," he said gravely. Jack's brow furrowed. "Who is she?" "Emily was a young woman who died years ago on that very stretch of highway," Mark explained. "It was no accident. She was murdered. Her spirit is restless, trapped in this world because she never received justice." Jack's blood ran cold. "How do you know?" Mark looked Jack in the eyes. "Because there have been others. Truck drivers, hitchhikers, even passers-by. They've all seen her, the woman in the red dress, her eyes burning red, her face twisted with rage. And once she finds you, she never lets go." Jack and Mark decided to return to the highway, the place where everything had started. As they drove into the night, the air grew heavy with anticipation. The road was empty, stretching for miles in all directions. They stopped near the spot where Jack had first seen Emily. The temperature dropped dramatically, and the eerie silence returned. Jack could feel the weight of the atmosphere. the oppressive sense of something watching. And then, there she was, Emily, standing at the side of the road, bathed in moonlight. Her red dress shimmered, and in the night, and her eyes burned with an unnatural fire. She floated towards them, her movement smooth and unsettling. Jack stepped out of the truck, heart pounding in his chest. Mark stayed inside, watching cautiously. Jack walked toward Emily, his voice steady but his body tense. "I know who you are," he said, his voice filled with empathy. "I know what happened to you, but it's time for you to rest." Emily's eyes locked onto his. For the first time, her expression softened. She looked sad, lost, like a soul trapped in a never-ending nightmare. "I need justice," she whispered, her voice like a distant echo. "I need my story to be heard." Jack nodded. "I'll tell everyone. I'll make sure they know who you were and what happened to you." With those words, Emily's form began to fade, her fiery red eyes dimming. Her body slowly dissolved into the night, leaving behind only a faint sigh of relief. The curse that had haunted the highway was finally broken. Jack, now free from the torment of the woman in the red dress, could return to his life. The highway, once a place of fear, was now just another road. And yet Jack couldn't forget. He would never forget the woman he had met that night. The woman who had been seeking justice for so long. Her story would live on in his heart, a reminder of the power of truth, the need for justice, and the importance of hearing the voices of the lost. But for now at least, Emily's spirit had found peace.